We interrupt your regularly scheduled brainwashing with a dose of reality from CNS Dispatch. CNS. Citizens, not servants.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever happens to be while you're watching. Hello and welcome to Dispatch number 12 from CNS Dispatch, where here we are citizens, not servants. Here at CNS, our goal is to bring you common sense truth to counter the lies you've been fed from our government, big tech, and the global mainstream media. So, yes, this is my third video of the day, but I just came across a couple articles that were very intriguing. So I did an interview with a gentleman the other day by the name of Larry, and we delved into the whole how the CDC counted deaths, didn't count deaths with COVID, from COVID, amongst a bunch of other stuff. But I wanted to kind of key on that one. So there was an article that came out today from the Epoch Times. The title of it is CDC removes 24% of child COVID-19 deaths, thousands of others. This was March 18th, 2022. So, per my video when I did an interview with Larry, we talked about COVID counting, how the CDC potentially violated federal law with regards to how they changed death certificate recording without going through the proper channels in a proper congressional mandated law. So, my statement was basically none of the stuff that from COVID has ever made sense to me. None of it. The way they counted it, the lethality, the morbidity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, one of the latest big push from the CDC, NIH, and IAID, our government, our media, was to vaccinate it. Then they went even further to vaccinating kids. They wanted, their first push was children age 12 and above, trying to make a mandate for them to get vaccinated. And then they started pushing for kids 5 to 11 years old to get vaccinated. They wanted it to be a mandate to attend schools. And in addition to all the other current mandates we have with regards to going to public places like theaters and sports and all this other stuff, or sporting events, arenas, movie theaters, etc. So they pushed the CDC, the NIH, the NIADA, the FDA, in conjunction with our media, in conjunction with our government, Jen Psaki, the mouthpiece of the current administration, was all pushing for our children to get vaccinated. Well, they got pushback. Studies came out showing where the COVID is not a concern. We don't have to worry about the lethality of COVID with regards to our children, because children just literally don't die from COVID. Healthy children. There's always the comorbidity piece of this. So I don't want to say that it's not lethal to kids. It's lethal to children that have already current life-threatening conditions, such as hypertension, such as heart disease, such as obesity, such as diabetes, such as kidney malfunctions, that kind of stuff. So it is lethal to a certain sect of our children. But normal, everyday, healthy children, COVID is not anywhere near at all lethal as what the CDC was pushing. That's what came out with studies, and that's why they got our government got pushed back, and they backed up from pushing for our children to be vaccinated. Well, so this article comes out today from Epoch Times. Oh, and by the way, it was also picked up by Zero Hedge. So it's not just one outlet. It's not just one far right-wing conspiracy theory, tabloid, whatever. This is multiple outlets. I'm just showing you these two, and the links will be in the description below. So the Epoch Times goes into this article. I try not to read these articles verbatim, but this is actually a pretty decent one, and I wanted to show you a couple things that were linked in the article. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, has removed tens of thousands of deaths linked to COVID-19, including nearly a quarter of the deaths it had listed for those under 18 years of age. So, timeline is we all have to social distance, we all have to wear masks, all these other mandates, the 15-day lockdown, etc., right? Well, then the vaccines came into play. Then we all need to get vaccinated. After the adults were vaccinated or started getting vaccinated, they started pushing for kids aged 12 to 18 to get vaccinated. Then they started pushing for kids 5 to 11 to get vaccinated. Well, then they got pushed back. So the government agencies that I've already mentioned, our media and our government had to kind of back off because they realized we weren't playing when it came to our kids. Well, lo and behold, And I addressed this in my interview with Larry, where I had stated that the Friday before Biden's most recent State of the Union address, the CDC changed their guidance again with regards to how they counted COVID. So this was the Friday before the State of the Union address. There was a majority of the United States on Thursday that were red. Everybody was in the red zone, or majority of the United States was in the red zone with regards to COVID. So they were still pushing for mandates with regards to masks and vaccine passports and that kind of stuff. Well, Friday they changed. They said, oh, no, we're going to change the way we count this. So majority of the country on Thursday was red or in the red zone. And on Thursday, a majority of the country was not in the red zone. Majority of the country went from the red zone to the caution zone, yellow/amber, however you want to look at it. And then the day after that, the Saturday before the State of the Union address by Biden, Pelosi came out and said no masks are mandated or required to be worn during Biden's joint session State of the Union address. So you got the timeline down. Well, back to this article. The health agency quietly made its changes on its data tracker website on March the 15th. So we go to the CDC's website. So as you can see, this is the CDC website. This is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's website. This is the demographic trends of COVID-19 cases and deaths in the U.S. reported to the CDC. So with the change that they made, what you have to do is scroll down to the bottom. You have to open the footnotes, and the last sentence of the footnote right here. On March 15, 2022, data on deaths were adjusted after resolving a coding logic error. This resulted in decreased death counts across all demographic categories. Like magic. Again, it's conditioning. Again, it's gaslighting by our media, by our government, by our governmental agencies such as the CDC, the FDA, the NIH, the NIAID, and Fauci, and all of them. They got pushback. They got shown publicly because of alternative media sites that were pushing the studies that were done about masks and mandates and vaccine mandates on kids, how the masks don't work. There's no study that shows that they actually had an impact when they compared states and countries that locked down to states and countries that did not lock down. There was absolutely no significant difference between masked and unmasked, and when it came to our children. Well, then they started pushing the vaccine mandate on kids. Well, studies started coming out showing a huge spike, not only in VAERS, but also in DMED and other studies across the globe, where there's a huge spike in medical conditions in our children within hours of being vaccinated. The two big ones being myocarditis and pericarditis. Those are the two big spikes that have been reported as adverse reactions directly attributable to the vaccine in our kids. That is factual. That is non-disputable. That is with beyond reproach from anybody who's, the COVIDiots that I like to call them, with regards to what's going on with our kids. So further in the article, it goes back to, so I showed you on the CDC website where they changed it. So back to the article, the CDC relies on states and other jurisdictions to report COVID-19 deaths and acknowledges on its website that the data is not complete. But the statistics are often cited by doctors and others when pushing for COVID-19 vaccination, including figures who believe virtually all children should be vaccinated. Dr. Rochelle Walensky, our CDC director, while pushing for the CDC's director cited the tracker's death total in November of 2021 while pushing for an expert panel to advise her agency to recommend vaccination for all children 5 to 11 years old. Again, our CDC director wasn't pushing to have a meeting or a cabinet or think tank put together of leading doctors to discuss whether or not vaccines should be mandated for our kids. She was calling for a cabinet, think tank, whatever you want to call it, to be put together to convince everybody that our children need to be vaccinated. They got pushed back, and then they changed their numbers. So later on in the articles, before changing, the CDC listed 1,755 children as dying from COVID-19, along with approximately 851,000 others, according to Kelly Cronert, a Georgia resident who's been tracking the updates. It's on the CDC website if you want to go look at it. The update saw the CDC cut 416 deaths among children and over 71,000 elsewhere, arriving at a total just under 780,000 deaths. So basically, prior to the change, we had 1,755 children listed as dying from COVID. Well, it was an error. My bad. Somebody messed up somewhere in accounting. So instead of having 1,755 children, which is the number and statistics that our CDC director was using to try to push the narrative that our children need to be vaccinated with this mRNA therapy injection that causes known medical conditions in our children. That's the number she used in trying to push her narrative. When push came to shove, and studies came out, and information was being leaked about all the negative stuff regarding our COVID vaccines, that number mystically, literally, overnight on March the 15th, changed from 1,755 deaths. They subtracted 416 deaths from that. So 25 roughly percent of the reported deaths from COVID were deleted because of an error in counting, according to our CDC director, who was pushing to have our children vaccinated, who was pushing to have a cabinet put together to show the American public why our children need to be vaccinated. The CDC previously adjusted its death count in August of 2021 after the identification of a data discrepancy. I don't know if you guys remember this. You probably got memory hold by a bunch of people. Back in August of 2021, the whole narrative got questioned because of the way our CDC was counting deaths. They were counting with and from COVID as COVID deaths. So if you died in a car accident, the most probably well-known example was the person that died in a motorcycle accident. They got listed as a COVID death because he had a positive COVID test. So the narrative got challenged because of alternative media and podcasts and people, influencers, and then it kind of slowly leaked into the mainstream consciousness that, hold on a second, you're counting people as a COVID death that didn't die specifically and explicitly from COVID, but just happened to have a positive COVID death or test or had COVID symptoms. But they died from car accidents. They died from a gunshot wound to the head. So when they got called to the carpet back in August of 2021, the CDC had to change their data records and dropped by I want to say it was a 6% across the board total. It varied age group to age group, the COVID death count. But we're supposed to believe our mainstream media. We're supposed to believe our government. We're supposed to believe agencies such as the CDC, the NIH, the NIAID with regards to what we should and should not be doing with regards to COVID. So the update is an improvement, but it's at least the third correction to this data and still does not solve the issue. It just highlights that people have been using a flawed source of data when discussing kids and COVID, Kroner told the Epoch Times in an email. Some journalists and doctors have been citing the tracker data while others use a tally that is managed by the CDC's National Center for Health in CHS and has been described by the agency as more reliable. So that is this right here. This chart right here, 2020 to 2022, all sexes, 0 to 17 years of age, 921 deaths. The CDC is reporting and has been reporting, 1,755 deaths in children as dying from COVID. There was an error. Oops, my bad. We now have 416 less deaths from COVID. So let's just do let's pull the calculator up. Let me pull this over here so you can see me do it. 1,755 minus 416 equals, that's 1,339 deaths, almost a 25% drop just from a flip of a switch. Well, the NCHS is reporting 921 deaths, which is 400 less deaths in children under the age of 17. Now, mind you, this is from the start. This is from 2020 to 2022. This isn't just the last couple of months. This isn't just over the last year. This is the total deaths over the last 2 years from COVID. And again, I want to point out, and I pointed this out in my video when I did an interview with Larry, deaths involving pneumonia, 1,446. There are 500 more deaths recorded from pneumonia than there is from COVID. But yet there's no push. There's no alarm bells being rang. There's no, mass media hysteria with regards to pneumonia in our children as there is with regards to COVID in our children. So let's go back to the article. Some journalists and doctors have been citing the tracker data, right? Well, the NCHS tally, which is compiled from death certificates, currently lists 921 deaths, which I just showed you, involving COVID-19 among children, some 966 deaths involving COVID-19 among other age groups. The deaths in the tally include people who died with COVID-19 and people who died from COVID-19, a CDC spokesperson told the Epoch Times in an email in January. COVID-19 was listed as the underlying cause or the primary death cause on about 90% of death certificates at that time. But we're supposed to go get this brand new technology, which was shortcuts taken, standards removed, no long-term tests, no long-term studies. It was rushed to market. I want to say it was 8 or 9 months from development to the first injection. We're all supposed to take it to keep everybody safe, even though it's been proven that it doesn't protect against COVID. The original vaccines don't protect against Delta, nor do they protect against Omicron, which we were lied about in those because Omicron had a 0.3% mortality rate. And then again, of the 0.3% that died from it, an overwhelming percentage were over the age of 70, and an even larger percentage of those had comorbidities. But we're not being told that information. We're just being told to count. We're just being told the deaths. But anyway, the vaccines are proven to not work against the variants. Natural immunity is showing to work better against the variants than these vaccines. These vaccines are so proven to not work that they are now coming out with booster number 4 to protect us and our children against this non-lethal disease called COVID, or virus called COVID, which across the board since day one, since all numbers have started to be calculated and tabulated, has never exceeded a 2% mortality rate. But we're supposed to believe our mainstream media, we're supposed to believe our government, we're supposed to believe the governmental agencies that are in place to protect us against communicable diseases. CDC, the National Institute of Health, the NIH, the NIAID, those are the agencies that are supposed to be in place to protect us, to help inform us, to provide guidelines to our government, whether it be federal or state governments, with regards to viruses, communicable diseases, outbreaks, pandemics. And here they are constantly lying to us about COVID, lying to us about vaccines, lying to us about the mortality. Whether it's an outright lie or lie by omission, it's the same thing. These agencies and our government is lying to us. Our media is lying to us on a global scale. And here it is, proof positive, without a doubt, that they got caught. They got called to the carpet. They got proven that their numbers were false and fictitious, and they had to change them, thereby reducing the number of deaths, which again reduces the lethality rate, which reduces the mortality rate of disease to even lower than now we're sitting at less than 1% mortality rate against this virus. It's conditioning people. If it weren't for alternative media, if it weren't for people that were speaking out, many of those people lost their jobs, risked their jobs to bring us the truth, we would not know this. This is the specifically what I was stating in my earlier video today about what happens when you're only presented one side of an argument. When you're only told one side, when you're only presented one side of evidence, when you're only provided one specific narrative, when you're only given a specific set of details, well, then what are you left with? You're left with a narrative that has no place in our thought processes of the day. We have to be able to see both sides, all three sides, all four sides, and be able to make our own decisions with regards to what we are going to do with our bodies. If we don't have it, we're fucked. So that's all I had to say about this. I hope you enjoy. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, rest of your evening, the rest of your afternoon. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.
This has been a dose of reality from CNS Dispatch. Citizens, not servants. We now return you to your involuntary mental programming.